So next we have Dr. Sethi, who's going to speak to us about both the Clinical Research Office and the CTSI. And Dr. Sethi is an amazing colleague. And Dr. Sethi, I'll offer you Tim Hortons for a week if you get us back on track with time. No pressure, but thank you for being willing to come with us.
I wish it was that simple. I mean, they are not very long presentations.
I know. I'm joking. You're talking about two critical resources. So thank you.
Okay, can everyone see the screen? All right, so I'm actually going to start with the CTSI first. Okay, there we go. So just to get some terminology, clear, we have a Clinical and Translational Research Center, which is actually the building. So the top 4 floors of the building that you see on Ellicott Street is the CTRC. The CTSI is the grant that I'm going to talk about, which allows us to provide support for research, clinical and translational research. And then there's also a partnership which underlies the CTSI, the Buffalo Translational Consortium, and I'll talk about that. The aim is, well, the CTSI is to advance research discoveries to improve health for all. And again, so Tim Murphy is the current director, and I'm the associate director on the CTSI. So the BTC was formed several years ago now, and you can see how extensive it is, including 5 health science schools, a lot of the clinical institutions, some of who are here today, several research institutes, and also community partners. So there is, this whole consortium, we come together, we interact in different ways. So I think what I'll focus on today is actually the inward-facing aspect of the CTSI, that I'll be talking about how it interfaces with researchers, but we also interface extensively with the community and with these various institutions that are shown on the slide. So the vision is to advance and accelerate clinical and translational science to improve the health of the community and the nation. So essentially, we are wanting to increase and improve clinical and translational research and science within within the BTC, and that we think will have an impact, of course, directly in the community, but beyond also because of the fact of the generalizable knowledge that's created. So how do we do it? We have these various cores. Again, not enough time to go through them. I really do. This is a large, it's a large number of people and team that are devoting extensive efforts on this. So please do visit the web page to get more information. We have these various cores: biomedical imaging, BIRD, biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design. I'll talk about the facilitation, which is a clinical research office, but we have community engagement, informatics, and on and on. So I'll just focus on a few today, but there are several cores. And then how do you access the course? It's actually quite simple. You go to the CTSI webpage and you go under cores and you hit the service request. And that'll tell you which, depending on what you're interested in, which core you want to address it to. We also have an option where you can say, I don't know who to talk to, but this is what my need is. So again, this is the way to really easily access the core by using the service request functionality here. Let's talk about pilot studies. I think that's another very important way that the CTSI has contributed and will continue to contribute to enhancing research, clinical and translational research in our community. It supports 4 pilot studies per year, which are focused on translational science, but also there is institutional funding support for another 8 pilot studies or so per year. They're about $50,000 each, these pilot studies for a year, but there could be some variation to that depending on the need. And the institutional funds support studies which are more focused on translational research. So translational science is the science to translate the discoveries, how to help improve the discovery and the translation process. Translational research is, of course, much more direct in terms of the translational aspect. We are currently finishing up on reviewing, and the cycle that'll be funded in January 2026, but the next cycle will be available in spring 2026. The CTSI also, I forgot to mention, is funded right now in this current version for 7 years, and we are in the first of the 7 years. So there's lots more that to come in terms of what the impact we can potentially have in this time frame. Moving on to education training. Again, this is only part of the webpage. Several resources are available for education and training. I'll encourage you to look at them. The two I wanted to highlight are the first two because they are the brand new ones. And for the clinical faculty on this course, there is a clinical research training course, which is focused for clinical faculty. We all realize clinical faculty is busy, so we have really worked on designing a course which can be done while you're doing your clinical duties and fulfilling those obligations. So I would highly encourage folks to look into that. There's also a clinical research coordinator training program. We realize the workforce for clinical researchers, the coordinators, well-trained coordinators are absolutely essential. And so we have also designed a program. There's a cost associated with that, but we're working on seeing if we can defray the costs. And again, there's many more other education and training opportunities. The case caller, actually, the case caller tab right now needs to be updated. The good news is, and this came is that, so previously the case caller program used to be part of the whole CTSI grant, but the current version, it's actually now dependent on the having the CTSI grant, but it's also somewhat independent. However, we are highly coordinated, and Katya Noyes and John Canty are the PIs on the K grant. We got the good news that it's funded, and I put this news went out in case you saw your emails, but there is a pre-proposal deadline for the case caller program coming up on October 6th. So there's information available under this tab, but of course, feel free to reach out to the PIs to get more information for the K awards. So I also, as I said, this is kind of, again, a sample of what our interactions can be with the people on this Zoom today, but we also have a lot of external facing interactions for our community. There are opportunities to get people involved in research from the community. We have a research registry with about 7,000 people. We have a participate in research portal. We have newsletters. We have other community outreach going on constantly. And then we are also part of, I won't say a network, but there are more than 60 CTSA institutions. We are very much encouraged to collaborate and share with the other institutions. There are grant opportunities, again, mostly focused on translational science, in which we have to work with at least one or more of these other institutions. There are, through the CTSA, we can help with clinical trial development, especially the kind of clinical trials that you're sending to the NIH for funding. So there's a trial innovation network and the recruitment innovation center, which we can act as liaisons and get people who are interested in touch with that. And we also receive clinical trial opportunities through Trinetics, and we forward those and try to find individuals for that, or PIs or investigators to continue to carry out those. So again, a very short summary, but basically we have a broad range of resources, and both Tim Murphy and I feel that we are still somewhat underutilized. So we are working on trying to improve communication, encourage the utilization of the various cores and the support that we offer, mostly at no cost. The bottom line is your success is our success. If our aim is to drive up research, clinical and translational, translation is a very broad term. So, anything done in which this research is enhanced, more studies, more papers, more funding, more people enrolled in studies, more people impacted by these studies, that's your success and that's our success also. So do visit the webpage, read the newsletters, and also use the service request functionality. I'm a very open door kind of person, so please feel free to contact me. If nothing else, I can always guide you to where the right person is to work with. So my email address and my office phone number is there. Okay. So that's for the CTSI. And Jill, should I just move on to the CRO?
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you for keeping to time.
Oh, good. Let me just make this larger, do the screen share again. Okay, so the other thing which which is again highly linked with the CTSI, but also has other functionalities, is our clinical research office, which I direct. So we're calling it clinical research facilitation in general, but what I'll be focusing on is the clinical research office aspect of it. So let's talk about the CRO. So before I kind of get into it, I just want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of what's clinical research and clinical trials. We like to use the NIH definition of clinical research, which, as you can see, is very broad. I mean, it's patient-oriented research in the sense that any research with human subjects where there is an interaction with the human subject, which are trying to understand mechanisms, test therapeutic interventions, do clinical trials, develop new technologies. It also includes epidemiological and behavioral studies, outcomes research, and health services research. So basically, any interaction with a human participant in research, with very few exceptions, falls under the definition of clinical research. Now, within it, of course, there's a subgroup of clinical trials, which are quite important, where, again, this is the definition where you're actually taking participants and assigning them to interventions and looking at the outcomes. So that's what defines a clinical trial, which is a subgroup of the clinical research. Because I think this comes up at times, is a clinical research or not, and this is where we come in. So what is a CRO? This was established also about 10 plus years ago. And because we never had a clinical research office at the university, so we are a centralized office which are charged with administrative and financial oversight for all clinical research activities of the university. All human subjects research we should be interacting with that because we want to support it, but also make sure of issues of compliance and support meaningful research. So that's what we are trying to do here. We are not sponsored programs, we are not IRB, we're not the CTSI, but we closely work with all of those institutions. Let me talk about all the things that we get involved with. So these are the CRO concerns. So if you imagine you've got again, a lot of our support goes towards industry-funded clinical trials, but it also includes clinical trials funded by foundations, the federal agencies, all of that falls there, and also clinical research in general, which are not clinical trials, but fall under the larger definition. So we get involved with that pretty much from the beginning till the end. So pre-award, we do not do the agreements. That's but within SPS now, but we facilitate those. Is it possible to do the research at the university? Do we have the potential participants? So we help with the feasibility aspect of studies. We work on the budget with you and the sponsor to get the right budget in place. In clinical trials, especially, there is always a question of, is this for the research project or is it standard of care? So we look at that because that can be a major issue if not done properly, and that's known as coverage analysis. We help with regulatory issues, especially IND, IDEs. We help new investigators who are brand new also with the regulatory work. Later on, we assume as investigators and research teams become more experienced, they can take it on themselves. But for new investigators, we'll provide fairly extensive regulatory support. We also make sure that our affiliated clinical institutions are properly informed and compensated for their expenses related to clinical research. And to some extent, we have with clinical trial design specifically. I don't want to say that we have the ability to help with all of study design. So once the award comes through, in the sense, once everything's in place, then We help with the financial aspects, the invoicing and accounting. The clinical trial management system I'll talk about. All clinical trials go into this management system, and this really keeps it, allows us to stay on top of the whole aspect of how the trial is doing. We do have a limited number of coordinators who we can, if you need a part-time coordinator, but on the other hand, we can also help you find a full-time coordinator if that's what's required. There is a clinical research center at the CTRC, which is again underutilized. It's a beautiful space. So again, if you're looking for space where you want to do studies, that's available, and we can help facilitate that. And then once the study is done, we work on study closure, moving over any funds to residual accounts, etc. So this is how we do it in the sense of, this is the workflow. I'll talk a bit about central study registration because that's the way for you to get into it. So I'll talk a bit about that. And then we do that in one electronic environment, the CSR environment. Then it moves over to CLIC, which is where the IRB happens, and then into the clinical trial management system environment where the study actually gets implemented and closed down. We work with the research team throughout. We try to do parallel processing, and that's why we instituted the central study registration, because we don't want you to go step by step, like first to the contract, then the budget. That'll take forever, and then the IRB, et cetera. So we try to make sure everything gets started at about the same time, so we ultimately come together at a point where everything's kind of done, and you're ready to launch your study. And we, of course, help with the engagement of CTSI cores so that, because there are absolutely wonderful resources there. I want to talk a little bit about central study registration. We are proud of it because we are the ones who actually created it. This is homemade software within the university. And it's kind of the starting point for any of these clinical research to get the clinical research office involved. It's a kind of a questionnaire with REDCap base. It's not complicated. There's a lot of questions because you want to know what's going on. It also allows you to upload your documents related to your study. It also allows us to look for assistance for the resources that you need to assist with doing the study. And then once you do it, you actually get a summary email. And this is just a sample. I don't want you to. The idea with the summary email is it tells you where you are, what you need as you move your proposal along. So the summary email is quite important and will give you the guidance that you need. Let me talk a little bit about I talked about central study registration. I just want to talk about 2 or 3 other aspects of which are quite important. Many of the research studies sometimes happen within the UB or UBMD environment, but many also happen with our clinical affiliates. And I mentioned ECMC and Kaleida Health. And we want to make sure that they are informed, they're compensated, all their requirements are met. So we, again, facilitate the process. It's quite important to make sure that we do this right with them. I talked about the clinical trial management system. It tracks enrollment, tracks the financials. Many a time it generates the invoices that goes to sponsors. Mainly this refers to industry-funded trials. It's also our system of record for assessing participation in clinical research to report to NCATS for the CTSI. So basically, we have to keep track of how many studies are being done in terms of clinical research and clinical trials, and also how well we are doing an enrollment. So we track that through Encore. That's why you will often get requests where you say, oh, I'm not doing any billing for these individuals, but we'll say, no, we'd like to know how many people have enrolled, provide us some characteristics about them so that we can use this to keep on top of and reporting for the NCATS. Again, to learn more, if you go to the CTSI under education and training, we have a bunch of these educational modules. These refer to all stages of clinical studies, from study development to the preparation for the study. There are modules from the IRB and other CTSI cores. There are modules that pertain specifically to budgets and contracts, and also to other resources like recorded, the open offices that we have. Those are all available here. So do have a look at this. These are short videos. They will not take too much time. And you can really get a lot of information from these educational modules. Another thing I just want to quickly touch on is there's a lot of confusion sometimes, especially at things being done at the trainee level. Am I doing a QA, a quality assurance QI project, or am I doing research? And in the past, all of this used to end up with the IRB, which would then take time and add to their workload. So what we did was created a QA/QI self-certification tool, which can allow you to determine on your own. And if there's any gray zones or we tell you, no, this is actually research, then you kind of follow the IRB process. So again, summary is that the CRO supports clinical research from the cradle to the grave, from before you even started to all the way till the end. We work very closely with the CTSI, the SPS, and IRB. Again, my information is there, but I have two excellent operational directors who can also are very willing to help out as needed. So I'll end over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sethi, for doing both presentations and for staying on time. You win the television today.
Okay,
So
good.
um,
How about the Tim
we'll,
Hortons?
we'll ship it off to your office. So